Welcome to Stories by You. Thank you so much for joining us and really tuning in for weekly interviews or anything that I do on this channel to encourage you and bring in special guests like I have one today to bring their expertise and their experiences to the table and just tell us a little bit about them. And I'm grateful for a good friend. Not only he's a good friend, family, and my neighbor. Oskhar is a keynote speaker, he's an entrepreneur and also an investor. He works for HRI, which is a successful construction company that's based in Washington, D.C. He's been an entrepreneur for over 3 decades and founded 2 companies, has mentored several entrepreneurs, and his approach to running a business is to building a holistic company culture based on team building, trust, accountability, and clear communication. There's a lot to be said with that because as we all know, there is the effective way that we communicate with one another. I know Oskhar does this not only for work, but in his personal life. So thank you so much, Oskhar, for taking this moment. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself if I missed anything.
Thank you, Farnaz, very much for that introduction. I'm humbled by it. And as Farnaz said, we've been friends for quite some time. I've been in business for a while, but I think what I'm most proud of in terms of accomplishments is the cultures that we have built, that I have built with my teams, the unity that we have created. And I don't think we could have done any of the things that we have accomplished if it wasn't for the ability to communicate clearly, because Farnaz and I have had a conversation here and there, and I've said communication will make you or break you. It is very important to have a clear communication, to have a good sense of direction, to convey the things you want to convey. And it goes not only in business, but it also applies to interpersonal relationships. As I said, I'm most proud of the fact that I have built teams that communicate well with each other. They have empathy, they have compassion, they care about each other. And at the end of the day, I think it doesn't matter what it is that we do. We want to get to a place where we have harmony, where we have fulfillment. But I think that's communicated through the way we relate to each other.
It's always great talking with you, Oskhar. It's easy when I talk to you. I think the effective communication that you do for others, you definitely do that in your personal life. For as long as I've known you, you've just been one that listens, you engage, and I love that about you. And I'm sure that whoever you're training, they can benefit and learn a lot from you. Let's just go into more like, how do we learn to listen more? Because that's really, I think it's a problem in our culture. We all have something to say and we're anxious to get our word out instead of listening to someone else. Can you elaborate how we can do that?
Oh, it's easy to interrupt. It's not as easy to keep yourself quiet and learn. But let me mention a couple of things before we get heavy into that. It's interesting what's going on with companies right now. We just got the news about the layoffs by Google, of all companies, Amazon, Microsoft, and a lot of these companies. So it's interesting to see the times that we're living in. Google put a press release out that was heavily criticized. I think he was effective in the way that he communicated what he communicated. So I give him an A+ for that. How people perceive it is their choice, but he was very eloquent in the way he said it. I think the majority of us think that we are good communicators because we know how to talk. But at a time when we think we're great communicators, 75% of communication is interpreted completely wrong. At work, 86% of employees and executives cite lack of communication and cooperation as the main causes of work failure. And at a personal level, about 65% of divorces cite difficulty or lack of communication as one of the main reasons as to why the relationships fail. So I think it's safe to say that communication is a very vital skill. It's necessary. We cannot live without communicating. But often we don't think is as important as it is as other things. At work, people or CEOs, managers might be interested in sending people to training on the latest software or training on the latest machine that we have. And let's go and get you training on this and training on that. And communication takes the back seat. But we hear people talking about effective communication, right?
Yes.
Effective communication has become an overused cliche. Everybody uses it. But what does it mean? It means different things for different people. But the objective is we want to get to a point that we relate the messages that we want to each other in a way that is understandable. Communication will make you or break you. So let's take a look at the listening part that Farnaz, you were talking about. That applies to interpersonal relationships, meaning with family, friends, your spouse. What does communication mean in terms of getting along with each other?
That's a good one.
Do we have to agree with everyone we talk to? We don't. We don't have to agree with them. But we have to keep in mind that if we want meaningful conversations with different people, not just the people that we like, not just the people from our church or our synagogue, or
I love that.
but with different people.
Yes.
So what is the best way to communicate with these people? One of the massively important skills is listening. So how do we learn to listen? Because when we are little, they teach us how to talk, how to move our lips, right? But mom and dad don't say, hey, this is how you listen.
Mm-hmm.
They don't teach us how to listen. They teach us how to talk. So how do we as professionals, our adults, as husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, how do we learn to communicate? What is the easiest way to learn to communicate? Well, that involves what Ms. Farnaz said, listening. That involves listening. It is the first thing that we must do. The best way that I find for me to have the incentive to listen is to look at the other person with empathy, to have empathy for that person, to understand that they want to get something out, that they want to communicate something, that they have something to say, because we all have something to say. And the more I take that into account, when I work out of a place of empathy, is easier for me to listen more. So where does listening come from? Listening does not happen. Listening is intentional. I have to make a decision that I want to listen. It just doesn't happen in a conversation. I have to make a conscientious decision to listen.
So I can't just tell you I'm not a good listener.
No, because see, when you say it's really a decision. When I label myself as a bad listener, it's basically saying I'm not willing to listen.
Yes.
Because it's intentional. I mean, it's a decision that I make. So it's kind of funny though, because people say, "Oh, I'm not
a good listener." I mean, I hear that all the time.
Yeah. So listening is intentional. So how do I also stay myself motivated to listen? I approach every conversation, and it happens when we talk, for us. When we talk, when you start talking, I sit back and I assume a position, the mentality of a beginner, because when I approach the conversation that we have together with a beginner's mind, my mind opens up.
Yes.
Because that means I have something to learn. In my mind, talking to means that I'm the one talking to somebody. To me, that doesn't come in saying this is a two-way street. So I always say I'm talking with. I was talking with, because that to me makes the conversation dynamic, not a one-way thing. What do you think about that?
I love that. It's communication is also a language, and how we communicate with one another. I think with people with a second language, like myself and my family, certain words I have to be careful, like what you say, like I was talking to Oscar. If I'm like telling Ariane or my husband, like I'm talking to, instead of saying talking with. The language itself is very interesting, and I'm glad you pointed that out, that we need to spend more time paying attention to what we're saying.
I mean, I can talk to you or I can talk with you.
Mm.
With is inclusive. Communication is there is body language, right? It's like I'm bored, I'm happy, but we pay more attention to the verbal communication. And it's really important to understand that there's a massive power that comes out of our mouths, because the first person who hears what I say, it's me. And it doesn't only impact other people. What we say, I believe, impacts us before it gets delivered to the ears of the other people. So I'm very mindful of the things I say, because if I speak in a very derogative way, I hear that first.
Yes.
It sends a signal to my brain. It gets me into a certain mood. It sets my brain into a whole different mode.
I mean, that's very interesting, Oscar, because with the percentages that you went through just earlier on, that those are high percentages when it comes to listening and communication, especially with marriages. I really am enjoying all of this conversation, by the way. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
It is amazing, Farnaz, because a lot of times there are people who have very good intentions. They're good people. They have good intentions, but somehow those good intentions get distorted in the way things are said. And all of a sudden we get tangled up into the tone of things. Now, I don't like the tone where the information was so simple, but somehow was delivered improperly. Somebody heard it the wrong way. The tone in which it came in set somebody off into the wrong path. And all of a sudden, instead of the substance of what was being said being the center of attention, it is the tone, or I felt assaulted or offended and that sort of thing. So as I said, there are a lot of people with great intentions, but communication can certainly put a spin on things. And so the other thing, Farnaz, concerning how I practice listening. Number one, as I said, I make the decision to listen, because listening is intentional. Number two is approach it with a beginner's mind. Number three is I ask open-ended questions, because when I ask open-ended questions, I'm opening the door.
Mm-hmm.
I'm inviting the other person to come in and actually open up and share. It's not, did you eat today? No. Are you going to sleep tonight? Yes. So I don't open my conversations with yes or no conversations.
Right.
In a good practice that works for me is, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? So it keeps the conversation going. So when I ask open-ended questions, what happens is I have a chance to sit back and listen. And I cannot even begin to tell you how many fascinating things I have learned from people that I had no idea that they had so much knowledge. And the only reason why that happened was because I just asked an open-ended question with legitimate interest, not just just to make small talk, but with the intention of learning something. And it's amazing how people are able to open up. And the other thing is, when if there is conflict, 99% of what we do at my work, Farnaz, is we solve problems. Like many businesses, we solve problems. And it's amazing when you ask an open-ended question when somebody is not happy, or there is a misunderstanding, or somebody has an issue with something that they want to push through, and you ask open-ended questions as opposed to the absolutes, yes or no's, how that kind of tones down the aggression, or it lowers the temperature of the conversation. So asking open-ended questions, to me, encourages me to listen, and it also sets the stage for a more amenable conversation. How much do I listen, and how much do I talk? I set typically a 70-30 ratio. 70%, I aim to have that percentage listening, and I spent 30% or less talking. Obviously, I'm talking more now.
I mean, I think, Oscar, when it comes to you and me, we can never stop talking because we both like love talking and get into conversations. But I know where you're going. The 70%, we need to have more of the listening ear, and the 30% is the talking. And, I struggle with that too. It's difficult for an extrovert.
But you know what? I think you do a great job. I really do, because the last few times we have talked, you're quick to kind of sit back and listen. And I think that's a skill, Farnaz. It's not easy to do, especially for people like us. We have a lot to say.
We have a lot to say. Plus, on a daily basis, Oscar, I think most of the viewers know that, are supporting the channel, that I love listening to stories. And when someone calls and say, yeah, I can tell you my story, but this is going to take a couple of hours. I'm like, well, I do have an hour time, so we can always catch up another time. I think doing the passion of this work on this channel has really helped me to listen more and say less, or the groups that I'm involved in, because I think talking a lot, really, you miss out on really there are people in this life that you can really just get to know by listening. There's so much more about the person than what you think you know. So it's
I
crucial.
like to say, when you're talking, you're not learning. If you're talking, you're not listening. And if you're not listening, you're not learning. But the other thing is, so communication is kind of interesting, because sometimes people say, oh, cultural differences and this and that. I think at the end of the day, we all want to be happy, right? We all want to have good relationships with other people. We all want the same thing. So I think communication is universal. We all want that interaction, and we want it to be meaningful. Communication is not specific to gender. It's not specific to religion or anything. And communication is a beautiful thing, because I think it can be a bridge for us to mitigate, or to do away with the gap
Yeah.
that we have between each other. As long as we do it with an open mind, and we do it with empathy, and we have a true desire to respect and interact with each other in a way that is constructive. And that requires the willingness to listen, whether we like it or not. We have our own paradigms, right? Our own ideas of how things should be. And a lot of times they're not even close to what we think they are. No matter who I meet, whether it is for the first time or someone I've seen before, I try not to have that paradigm. I approach the person with an open mind. I don't want to formulate opinions before I get to know the person. So by having an open mind, I avoid making the mistake of formulating opinions that are not based on facts. Also, the empathy part.
Yes.
because if I have empathy, chances are I'm not going to be judgmental. Interestingly enough, when it comes to communication, the weakest skill we have is
Tell us.
listening.
Yeah.
It is the weakest skill out of everything. The weakest skill that we have is the ability to listen. So, how do we solve that? We have to make a decision to listen and practice, 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 because oh my goodness, in your heart, you want to jump into the conversation because, oh, I want to say it because
Yeah.
I said it before. If I don't say it now, I'm going to forget it, right? If I don't say it now, please let me say it because I'm going to forget if I don't tell you this right now. Has that ever happened to you?
It's very true. It's so true because I have to intentionally hold myself back and say, hey, like, when someone calls you, Oscar, right? It's
Uh-huh.
the same thing. We have people call and they're calling us. So there's a reason they're calling us, and we're ready to just tell them, unload, about our issues and what happened and go through our deal. Would there be any suggestion as far as, improving communication? Can you run through that really quickly? And lastly, just let the audience know how, if there is anything more they want to know and they love the way you speak and they want to contact you, how would they do that? So then we can close with that.
Within the next 3 to 4 months, I'm going to have a presence on even TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to look me up, I'm on LinkedIn. I post regularly on LinkedIn. Some of the things that I post are somewhat instructional, educational. They apply to businesses, but they apply to personal matters also. So look me up on LinkedIn at Oscar Pineda. If they type my name, I'm going to show right up. Suggestions, we have two categories: the person-to-person interpersonal relationships, suggestions to communicate, and communication in general. How do you improve communication if you're in a relationship? There is a book called A Passage to Intimacy that not only talks about communication between couples, but communication in general, that has a 5-step exercise for couples called the daily temperature. And basically, this exercise walks you right through every simple step of how you communicate in a targeted, conscious, loving, empathetic way. Step 1 is appreciation. Step 2 is new information. Step 3 is puzzles. Step 4 is complaints with requests for change. And step 5 is wishes, hopes, and dreams. So this whole thing, if you either get the book out of the library or you buy it, is called, as I said, A Passage to Intimacy. Beautiful, beautiful book that will be a great place for anyone in a relationship. It's a gold mine to start communicating in a proper, kind, compassionate, empathetic way.
I love that. And I just wanted to mention to the audience, would you just run us through the 5 steps and the name of the book? I will be putting all of this information in the description and your information, Oscar. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, I wanted to just thank you, Oscar, again for giving us this opportunity. I wish that we did have a couple hours, but we can always bring Oscar back and we can always sit down and talk about communication. I don't think there's any timeline. We can talk about communication for a very long time and how we can be more effective in communication. So like you said, it's a cliche when we talk about communication. So I just want to thank you again.
Thank you, Farnaz. I appreciate it. It means the world to me. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for joining and thank you for supporting the channel. And as always, I love you guys. And tune in if you have any questions, just put in the comments, like and subscribe or share. And have a great day. Take care.